Bonjour, je suis Mathieu Carbas, journaliste à l'actualité. Je vous reçois aujourd'hui en direct de Movin'On, le sommet sur la mobilité durable. Aujourd'hui, mon invité, Marc de la Vergne. Bonjour.
Okay.
You are Chief of Mobility Innovation at City of Detroit.
Correct.
What is exactly your
Sure.
role?
It's a really wordy title, and it's not like a standard title. So,
Okay.
Mayor started this office a little over 2 years ago,
All right.
around the idea that we're doing a lot of investments in transit. We're doing a lot of investments in traffic and bike lanes, what a lot of cities are doing.
Okay.
But understanding like how can we get more options out for Detroiters, and whether they're new options like car share, bike share, scooter, all the things that are happening, but making sure that not only we're beginning to get them in Detroit, but they're beginning to work for all Detroiters. So that is basically my role, is to figure out how we get them to everybody, and how we talk to them and how we make them successful.
Okay, and so what have been done in order to achieve a successful transition between, from the motor city, as we know Detroit, and a new multimodal city?
Sure. So it's people are going to drive, right? Like, it is the motor city. Cars have dominated for decades now.
Yeah.
And for a lot of folks, they need their car to get where they need to go, because historically, the region has not invested in transit like many other regions. You know, we've got 70% of the folks that live in the city that need to get outside of the city to where they work.
Okay.
And transits can be a very difficult option for them, so they're still going to need to drive. But particularly for the folks that can't afford to drive, that rely on transit, how we can look to get more options out to them, that's a big priority of ours. And then secondarily, just beginning to start to have conversations, and whether it's like a bike lane in your neighborhood or you got some scooters dropped off. You know, this is a conversation, right? This is a big change that's happening, and the change can always sometimes feel like it's happening to you instead of with you.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we're trying to do much better, is really involve the residents in these conversations about what their future of their neighborhood from all aspects, right? Not just from transportation, but how their neighborhoods look, how their parks look, how their streets look. So that we can better understand how, when we begin to bring these new modes and these different changes, how we can make sure that they're successful.
Okay. And do you think that people are like slowly changing their mind about about transportation and?
Yeah, so last year we...
Can you feel it?
I don't know if I can feel it, but I have some anecdotes to share with you.
Okay.
So last year we built, basically, I think it is the largest protected bike lane in the United States.
Oh, wow.
It's on Jefferson Avenue. It runs basically from the eastern border of the city all the way to essentially downtown. It's about 7.3 miles.
Okay.
We got a lot of pushback early on. Part of it was we could have done some better outreach, and I think it's probably something we can always say with our projects, is we could do better outreach.
Okay.
But a lot of people just didn't see this vision. It was a very wide street, and really what we wanted to communicate was, this is the essentially largest street that disconnects the Detroit River from the rest of the city.
Okay.
And that just simply being able to make this connection is a safer connection for you, for people to get to the river and get to different parks. And a lot of people really hated the project early on. It would no problems just sort of voicing that. But then, you know, a lot of those people would talk to me afterwards and say, like, I'm starting to get it now, right? I'm seeing it, I'm touching it, I'm feeling it.
Okay.
I rode my bike with my kids to Belle Isle, and okay, that starts to make a little bit more sense. But you know, this same change, like, we need to be better on how we bring people along and better understand, like, do they want this change? What do they really want? And is this a tool to solve that problem?
All right. Very interesting. You also launched last year the Detroit Mobility Innovation Initiative, which is a partnership between public and private. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
So we obviously have a lot of private sector players in this industry of mobility, that are launching new things themselves and understanding where do they fit in this new world of mobility. Okay. And so we had a conversation, is like, listen, we've got a few pilots up and running, but we want to better incorporate our residents into our process as far as customer discovery and iterating, but we also want to bring you corporate partners on board as well, so that you can hear from our residents, but that we can hear from you as well, right? Like us basically saying this seems to be like a great idea, run a business around it. There might be 3 or 4 just giant fatal flaws to say like this is why we can't do that. So it was a real true public-private partnership where we would bring in residents, they would talk about
everyone around the same table.
And well, it was just like individual interviews, but we would have people from the city, people from GM, Lear, DTE, our electric utility was on board, the state of Michigan, all hearing the same thing, right? Okay. So that then particularly on the private side, that you could see their point of view change a lot over time as they began to understand. Because I mean, I think the thing is, transportation and mobility is a very personal experience. You experience it, and that's what you're thinking is
as
the problem,
customer.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But your experience is not the same as my experience. My experience is not the same as a single mother who's got to drop 2 kids off and doesn't own a car, right? Like, so we can't live that, but we can learn from it, and listen to it, so that we can be able to build services and products to identify how we make it just easier for those folks to get around.
Okay. Very interesting. You also started a partnership with Lyft,
Yep.
A company that we know here in Quebec also.
Yep.
How does it work?
Sure. So when Detroit was going through its really rough time, lots of cuts were made, including cuts to bus service, and we cut all of the overnight routes that serve the transit. So there was no buses running at 3 o'clock in the morning. That didn't mean people, nothing, right? So that didn't mean that people didn't need to get to work still, right? But if you get off at 3 o'clock, then your option is either 1, call a cab every single night,
so you can't,
or 2, wait until 6 o'clock in the morning until the buses start running. So when the mayor came in 2014, this is one of the first things that he just sort of grabbed, just saw, and is like, we can't do this. So over the last 3 years, essentially, we've gone from 0 to 12 routes that run 24 hours a day. But at the same time, the transit service that we run at 2 o'clock in the morning is not the same as it is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We still have gaps in the service. So we had this pilot with Lyft where if you're riding the bus between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., we'll give you a free $7 credit, which essentially gets you about 1.25 miles.
Okay.
And to say, like, is this something that people will use, and is this going to make things easier? One of the things that we learned early on was that not necessarily all of our customers who use DDOT think multimodal like that. Think I will take the bus and then a Lyft.
From
exactly, right? They'll say, I will take a bus or a Lyft, but not beginning to combine them. So that was the first thing where it's like, okay, well, we've got some work to do on that piece. Work to do on marketing and getting a program out like this. But we've learned a lot from this, and we've been able to kind of continue to scale the project and just continue to make it work better. Now our next big step, which is like the quote-unquote real innovation, I feel like, is figuring out how do we pay this sustainably. We were funded through philanthropy to catalyze the project. We have grant funding to continue the project. But long-term, obviously, we can't be paying $7 a ride plus the DDOT. I mean, that's a huge subsidy. Okay. So thinking through, like, what's the business model? Who is this program really benefiting? Which we have a hypothesis are employers who need their employees to have reliable transportation at this hour of the day, and thinking through how do we make sure that this continues to work long term. Okay, good. And about like other projects, do you have like maybe one to? Sure. So similarly, car share is where you can rent a car by the hour, right? We don't have car to go. We don't have point to point like car to go. Just traditional pick up and drop off at the same location. All of our car share locations are essentially downtown. That doesn't mean that car share, people wouldn't use car share every other places, but from a private standpoint, they've said this is where we feel like we can make a business on this. So we're doing a program in partnership with GM. It came out of that Detroit Mobility Initiative, as well as a community group that's focused on workforce development. To say, like, if we can put a car in the east side of the city where GM necessarily wouldn't go, have the community group program it for workforce appointments that are, out in the suburbs, and then outside of those hours, open up the public and see if the demand's there. Does that make it work, right? And then if it doesn't make it work, what's the gap, and then what's the potential gap that we need to fill to make it work? But that's a part of our role, is like to figure out, like, these things are out here. How do we bring them to the city, and how do we make them work from a business model standpoint, and what's our role in the funding piece? Okay, good.
If tomorrow a company wants to bring their own products, that could be autonomous vehicle, dockless bike, etc., etc., how can they? What happens to your point of view? What do you do?
Sure. So this happened obviously last year with scooters. Mayor called me in the office and is just like, I've seen the scooter thing. I don't want a lot of drama. I just want you to make it happen and not like spend tons of hours of our legal team be negotiating in the press. Just like make this happen and see how it works in Detroit. So that's basically what we did. Is we took we didn't go on the way of saying no completely. We didn't go on the way of saying do whatever you want. We basically said like, we're going to make this easy for you to come in, and in return, like here are the guidelines that we expect you to follow. If you don't do it, I'll go throw your scooters in the river. But you know, and that worked out pretty well, right? Because you know. These companies, you know, they're going to individual markets, can spend a lot of time having to make the negotiations. For us, it was basically like, we know it's going to happen eventually. Let's see it. Let's see how it works. Let's see what's good, what's bad. What are the use cases that we think we want to start driving towards? And the use case we saw is there are a lot of people outside of downtown who can use this to cut down on their walk to the bus, right? So we had a first set of guidelines. We updated those later in the fall and said, like, we need you to have 25% of your fleet outside of downtown. And then started partnering the companies with community groups that can help build the demand. But yeah, that's kind of our point of view is like we want new innovative products and services coming in, but we want to be able to learn quickly from them and help them achieve the outcomes that we're looking for as a city.
Okay, and if you had one thing that Montreal could learn about Detroit, what will it be?
Sure. So I think we're doing process really well, right? And process in involving our residents and doing it in getting really meaningful input. One of the ways we're doing that is essentially paying them for their time. You know, no different than a company would do as a focus group. Traditionally, public outreach done by cities, we pay consultants a lot of money to host a big event and then expect everyone to come and volunteer their time. Where the people who are really sort of giving us the information that benefits us, that's who sometimes we should be considering, like maybe they should be the ones that are being compensated as well, not just the consultants. So we've been doing a really good job of that and involving them in all steps of the process, you know, learning problem statements, starting to throw ideas, kind of seeing like how they would use it, what do they see as good, what do they see as bad, and continuing to just ideate over time with them in partnership.
Okay. And maybe one last question. We have here in Quebec a huge debate about what we call the troisième lien, which is like a new bridge in Quebec. Some people want to build this new bridge and some new roads on the side, and some people don't. What do you think about this situation? Because I know that it happened like everywhere, even in the States.
Yeah, so I think that the challenge that we're facing as a state right now. So our governor just got elected on a policy of fixing the damn roads.
Okay.
Because our revenue streams have not kept up with keeping our roads up in good shape. And I think anytime you're making a big infrastructure decision at this point, you have to say like, not just sort of the capital, but the ops side as well. Like, how are we going to sort of keep this up and running for the next 30 years? Yeah. And then how are we going to rebuild it? And I think, not knowing anything about the situation, I think that's that's the thing that, you know, we push on projects like this. It's not just simply saying like, you know, do you have the funding to get it up and running, but how do you keep it up and running? Okay. And so that you're not like struggling for resources or pulling from this pot so that the road doesn't have a lot of potholes.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Merci beaucoup. Et puis, on vous donne rendez-vous pour le prochain Facebook Live dans quelques minutes, je pense. À bientôt.